Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Peter coming at you through the tubes of the internet. Today, taking a look at the latest release from The Wonder Years, an album called Sister Cities. I'm excited to discuss and glad you could join.
Fast Facts.
Sister Cities, released April 6, 2018 via The Loneliest Place on Earth Collective, is the sixth studio LP from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania-based pop-punk band The Wonder Years. The group currently consists of 6 members: frontman Dan Campbell, lead guitarist Casey Cavallare, rhythm guitarist Matt Brash, drummer Mike Kennedy, keyboardist Nick Steinborn, and bassist Josh Martin.
Backstory.
The Wonder Years began their run in 2005 with early releases featuring a mostly straightforward pop-punk sound that also showed some post-hardcore influences. Vocalist Dan Campbell's passionate performances of his well-written lyrics have always been a highlight for the band, and the group's initial offerings often took a humorous look at love-hate relationships with city life in Philly and the characters they encountered at home or on tour. But Campbell also included reflections on his struggles with loneliness and anxiety, chronicling the highs and lows of his personal relationships. This gave lyrical depth and provided a nice contrast with the sillier aspects of the tunes. As the band's catalog progressed, the songwriting got more serious. Soupy still wrote about personal drama, but also incorporated broader commentary on societal issues, such as criticism of war and religion, or sharing how the band and friends were affected by the opioid crisis. Over the course of their first 5 albums, The Wonder Years struck a great balance between light and dark, funny and serious, juxtaposing songs about depression and desperation against tunes with inspiring and empowering themes. With this, musical elements of the band's sound also matured to incorporate more emo and rock instrumentation. The group grew increasingly apt at using their large roster to craft huge layered sounds, but also developed their ability to dial the complexity back for sparse acoustic tracks. Sister Cities finds the band using that contrast between heavy and soft instrumentation in a way that's starting to feel a touch predictable. Dynamic elements of the lyricism have been stripped back, and the balance between comedy and tragedy now seems to have a finger firmly planted on the gloomy side of the scale. There's still plenty to love about this release, but like its drab album art, Sister Cities is a somewhat monochromatic representation of the band. It's a mostly humorless incarnation of the Wonder Years with their trademark personality muted a touch. That said, there's still some excellent songs here, and Sister Cities is a worthy addition to the Wonder Years catalog.
Track-by-track analysis.
This release has 11 tracks and clocks in at around 44 minutes. For the most part, it moves along at a pretty brisk pace, but the thematic sameness causes it to drag in a couple spots. The band dropped 2 teaser singles ahead of the album's release. First, the hard rocker title track Sister Cities, followed by the more moody and brooding Pyramids of Salt. Sister Cities got the full music video treatment with an excellent short film that featured band performance footage spliced with vignettes taking place in a single hotel room. The isolated scenes were unified by following a housekeeping staff member tasked with cleaning up the various messes left behind in the prior sequences. It's an awesome video highlighting one of the album's standout tracks. Pyramids of Salt, on the other hand, just got generic stock footage overlaid with the album artwork. There are a couple interesting visuals, but for the most part it's just standard fare, not synced particularly well with the audio either. It just seemed like placeholder imagery for posting the video on YouTube, and unfortunately the song was a little bland, kind of derivative of emo genre tropes.
Track 1, Raining in Kyoto.
This album kicks off with an absolute banger. The Wonder Years follow the tradition of putting their best foot forward with tunes like Came Out Swinging or My Last Semester, and really deliver on this opener. Powerful instrumentation and anthemic vocals send this tune barreling forward through its 4-minute runtime. The album's ongoing themes of loss and distance are established early with touching lyrics about Campbell being thousands of miles away in Japan while his grandpa's health deteriorates back home. We get a sense of powerlessness when all Dan can do is send a radio to distract from annoyances or light a candle like you did on Cigarettes and Saints as a memorial. The vocal melodies shine here and they're some of the most distinct on the record. The guitars are punishing late in the tune and sound a bit like Manchester Orchestra's Shake It Out, and the false ending back into another run through the chorus lands perfectly. The only downside is this tune sets the bar really high. The album peaks a bit early and struggles to find this oomph again for several tracks later on the record.
Track 2, Pyramids of Salt.
Like I mentioned earlier, this song doesn't really do it for me. The lyrics are dark and poetic, but mostly just a hodgepodge of genre cliches. Having trouble breathing, reaching in the rib cage, night starts to decay, kinda seem like they're copy-pasted from the emo handbook. The bridge instrumentals are the high point of the track, but this section also has the most generic lyrics of all. Earlier in the runtime, the twinkly guitars laid over the moody synth reminds me a lot of Brand New. Definitely not a band I feel like shouting out in light of recent revelations, but the similarities with this and tunes like Sowing Season or Tommy Gun are a little uncanny, especially the way the guitar and drums first enter the mix. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, and this isn't necessarily a bad song, but releasing this as a single seems like an attempt to throw something easily digestible to rock radio audiences. It has hints of a new sound for the Wonder Years, but definitely not a new sound for the genre in general.
Track 3, It Must Get Lonely.
Another tune that didn't really grip me. It goes on for nearly 5 minutes, but the chorus is just a song title repeated over and over. It's a mid-tempo cut that seems a bit underwritten. I'm super indifferent to this one, and it's one of my least favorites.
After 2 weeks in the dark.
Track 4, Sister Cities.
This is a goodie. It's a tune that sounds a bit different for the band, but like a natural progression of the Wonder Years songwriting process. The intro guitars have a sun-drenched rock vibe and drop out to a nice bass groove for the verses. I love the rush vocal delivery of the pre-chorus. It seems like it almost doesn't fit in the space it's crammed into, right into Soupy's bleak, vivid imagery on the refrain. He's down on his luck, but someone's looking out for him. There's some light at the end of the tunnel for once. And we get that witty turn of phrase about laying low as part of the mangy, emaciated dog metaphor they use for the album art. It recurs throughout the track in an effective way. This cut feels like the Wonder Years firing on all cylinders as a unit who's been playing together for a decade. Normally I dislike the modern rock sound, but they've won me over with this well-crafted tune.
Track 5, Flowers Where Your Face Should Be.
Bright blue-eyed strangers, lost in the weeds.
This is a touching love song that seems to be about Campbell missing his now wife while out on the road. He sees their relationship mirrored in couples all over the globe and reflects on how she's been there for him. And true to form, it's sad as hell. One scene is a man having an emotional breakdown on a street curb while his girlfriend comforts. This album just can't escape the whoa, no matter how happy the subject matter. It's a simple song overall, but there's nice subtle flares peppered in, like the way Dan swaps different flowers into the chorus lyrics, or the fast hi-hat drum taps Mike Kennedy works in near the end of the runtime. It's a good track and a bittersweet offering that kind of sounds like the solo stuff Soupy does under the name Aaron West in the Roaring Twenties.
Track 6, Heaven's Gate, Sad and Sober.
another super repetitive chorus like It Must Get Lonely, but in this case it's a great couplet, tightly written and moving. It's also a full minute shorter than that track, but it seems like it accomplishes a lot more because it keeps progressing into new territory. I love that this tune deviates structurally from other cuts and ends on a light bridge, with great lyrics about the air conditioner condensation and Chekhov's gun. Even though the instrumentation gets lighter, this tune stays impactful right to the very end.
Falls, rain falls from the window I see you bandit. You know it's a car wreck. You were the rifle on the wall, and it was always gonna end like this.
Track 7. We Look Like Lightning.
God, what month it is again.
I'm going to sound like a damn broken record with this criticism, but I just can't shake that this is another tune that sounds like a brand new ripoff. Specifically Untitled 09, The Edge fills in for Vin, whatever you want to call it. This track's probably the biggest grower for me on the release. I initially really disliked it, but I'm starting to come around. If you can get past the cheesy "What Song Do You Want to Die To" chorus, there's cool lines elsewhere, like the airplane beacon lighting up the clouds or the motor sounding like the ocean. They tie in well with the running motifs of the album. There's also a really scorching bridge that harkens back to the sound of Jason Butler's guest spot on Stained Glass Ceilings. And more than anything, it makes me long for another great feature or some scathing political lyrics, which are both sorely missing from this release. That was such a high point in No Closer to Heaven, and I wish they would have pursued something similar on Sister Cities. But I do appreciate the instrumental shifts that make up each part of this song and make it distinct. It's not a bad tune, it just has aspects that remind me of disappointments with the album.
What song do you wanna die to?
Track 8. The Ghosts of Right Now.
I wanna take you someplace safer, pull your pain out with my teeth.
This song's a bit tedious, every line is shouted throughout, and just seems like an attempt to force it to sound passionate when the songwriting's not the release's sharpest. The title of the track's a good indication of how corny this one gets. It also seems to have the muddiest production or mixing on the release. This issue kind of plagues the record in general, but on tracks like Whining in Kyoto it gives a chaotic feel, and here it just sounds like a mush.
Track 9. When the Blue Finally Came.
This is a nice transitional track, short and atmospheric with light vocals over droning bass tones. The levitating imagery in the lyrics matches the dreamy feel of the instrumentation, and it really clicks stylistically. There's not a whole lot of this song on its own, but the way it breaks up the two heavy hitters surrounding it makes the section flow well. I actually really like this song and the approach they took with it. I wish they'd use this varied track length more on the songs that drag elsewhere on the release.
Watch you jump off of a cliff and start to levitate.
Track 10. The Orange Grove.
This song's incredible, tied with Rainy in Kyoto as my favorite on the release, and finally a tune that seems to be carrying a hefty message. The Orange Groves may be commenting on the way people in poor rundown areas are misled to believe they can thrive again in their old ways. And the lyrics are excellent. There's tough talk from a snake oil salesman, and Dan includes a possible Mountain Goat shout on that West Texas line. It seems fun and snarky, but also meaningful. And musically, this thing rips. The contrast between the verses and refrains makes both pop. My favorite aspects come at the end of the tune, with the warbling guitar strumming and the return of some booming gang vocals for that last chorus. This tune rules. It's an A+ for me.
Take me back to the orange grove.
Track 11. The Ocean Grew Hands to Hold Me.
Stop making deals with God. When will I finally die?
This is a big, sweeping, cinematic song. It incorporates bowed string sounds and a reverse decay guitar effect that adds sonic variety, showing this old dog still has some new tricks late in the runtime. It almost sounds like a film score overdrawn with vocals. We get Julian Baker-esque lyricism here with a personal struggle with God, leaning on loved ones instead of taking comfort in false hopes when things get bad. I don't think the tune actually is quite as deep as it wants to come across, but it's definitely a nice effort. In promotional interviews for the album, Soupy keeps repeating this line about how the ocean doesn't divide us, it unites us. But I'm not convinced the idea quite works, even after hearing this tune. It sounds nice, but it's sort of fluff.
Verdict.
Overall, I like this release, but it's definitely not the Wonder Years' best. It gets stuck in the mud too often with overly melodramatic sentiments and just feels like it's spinning its wheels. Soupy's usually such an incredibly sharp songwriter, and in interviews he's been describing the album as examining ways we're interconnected all over the world and how distance doesn't matter, but there's hardly any positive unifying message that makes it through in what I heard in these songs themselves on the album. If these themes are present, it's in a roundabout way, and that's my main complaint about the release. It just seems kind of subdued and vague. There might be tunes with a slight message, but none of the direct in-your-face, unequivocal punk edge that makes its presence known here. That seemed to be what they were building towards with the excellent releases The Greatest Generation and No Closer to Heaven, but this is a step back in that regard. There's some great songs here, but this is just a middle-of-the-road album for the Wonder Years in my opinion. For that reason, I'm going to give the release a 7.5 out of 10. So that pretty much wraps up my thoughts on the album. Let me know in the comments what you thought of the release, my critique, and also the review format in general. This is a lot of work, but also fun, and definitely worth it if it helps some people wrap their head around the record. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.
It's a series of tubes.